G'day, doomsayers. Let me just read a little bit to you. Hang on, I'll go back to the article. I'm just on the phone at the moment, so it's not ideal. But I'm going to talk about foreclosures being red flags before a financial crisis. So we sort of, history repeats, but, it doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So we're rhyming at the moment with 2008 for sure. This is an article on Zero Hedge. And who wrote it? Here we go. Authored by Michael Snyder via the Economic Collapse blog. Well, there we go, doom and gloomers. Foreclosures in the United States. We'll start off with United States and we'll go to Australia's problems as well. In October alone, there were 36,766 foreclosure filings. The first step in the process when a lender warns a borrower they're in default. That's up 3% from September and 19% from a year ago. Foreclosure activity continues its steady upward trend in October, the 8th straight month of year-over-year increases. The rise is stirring uncomfortable memories of 2008, when a wave of foreclosures triggered the worst housing crisis in modern history. Read the second paragraph, that quote again. The foreclosure activity has increased for 8 consecutive months. That is what we call a trend. States with the worst foreclosure rates were Florida, 1 in every 1,829 housing units with a foreclosure filing, South Carolina, 1 in every 1982 units, and Illinois, 1 in every 2,570 units, Delaware in every 2,710, and Nevada 1 in every 2,747. Among metro areas with populations of 1 million or more, Tampa posted the highest foreclosure rate at 1 in every 1,373 housing units. Following Tampa were Jacksonville, 1 in every 1,576 housing units, and Orlando, 1 in every 1,703. And on it goes. What a mess. The good news, it looks like there will soon be a lot of homes on the market in Florida. We live at a time when our nation is facing a very serious housing affordability crisis, and this has hit our young adults particularly hard. The following chart, which is once posted by Charlie Kirk, demonstrates how home ownership among young adults has plunged in recent years. So it shows a chart. See if I can click on it and actually look at it. And I'll blow it up. I'll make a screenshot of it and put it on this podcast here for you. Oh, you're 50% in 1950, right? Of homeowners, of young people. This is who are both married and homeowners. Age 30, married and homeowners age 30, around about. 30-year-olds who are both married and homeowners, right? In 1950, it was 50%. In 2025, it's hard to read, that's such a small number. Oh, it's about 7.5% by the look of it. Yep, it'd be 7.5%. Hardly anybody that's 30 and married is a homeowner. Now, when they talk about a homeowner in this thing, I'm sure they're talking about, people that think they own the home, that people that have mortgages. They call people with mortgages homeowners. They're not really. That's the bank owns it, but they'll call them a homeowner. So that figure could be even lower. What about that 7% that's left? They've probably got a huge bloody mortgage. God knows. But and so these people, they're talking about these young adults are convinced. There we go. These days, a lot of young adults are convinced that they'll never be able to become homeowners. Others that have really stretched themselves financially to purchase homes are now being hit with foreclosure notices. I really detest that Wall Street has what Wall Street has done to the housing market, and now we're reaping the consequences. Renting is the primary alternative to home ownership, but renters are having a really hard time right now. As Daisy Luther has aptly pointed out, vast numbers of renters are being ruthlessly evicted from their homes in this very harsh economic environment. Well, I don't know about ruthlessly, but if you've got an investment property and they don't pay the rent, you're underwater, so it's either you or them, so you have to throw them out, get someone to pay. That's not ruthlessly, that's economics in this distorted, horrible environment that they've created for us. I digress. Rents in America are ridiculously high in many areas. I mean, this is parallels with Australia. I may as well just insert Australia, so I'll keep reading. And nearly impossible to find in other areas. This is harder to track than foreclosures for two reasons. Nobody official is keeping track of evictions, so we have to rely on extrapolated data from regions that do have somebody watching. One example of this is a company called Eviction Lab that tracks data from 10 states, but only in specific cities and countries in those states. Even with this sparse reporting, their homepage shows more than 1 million evictions over the last year and more than 78,000 last month. Now, this is parallel to Australia. I sold a property in Mount Garnet not too long ago, and the lady was not the best tenant in the world. Let's put it that way. All right. So in this environment, you've got to be the best tenant in the world, otherwise you won't even get a house to live in. And we gave her 3 months' notice, and she ended up in a tent on her mother's back lawn with 4 kids. And what can you do? Like I've got an owner that's got really old, that needs to sell the property, that can no longer maintain it for the tenant. The tenant's been there for 10 years. And had the opportunity to and saved a deposit and never bought a house. And most times in the last 10 years it would have been too expensive, like overpriced. I mean, they're extremely overpriced now. We're right. Oh my God, we just got anyway. We got so many years' wages to buy a house. It's unbelievable. But I'm in a rural backwater. But it doesn't make any difference. There's people living in tents in the bush around town. There's people with nowhere to live. And it's not even, there is pressure. There is pressure from people moving here. People, the Caucasian Australians seem to be running out to the countryside while the cities fill up with immigrants. Restrictions on planning, restrictions on releasing land, extremely expensive to release land, extremely tough to go through the process, make it really hard to release land. That doesn't help either. But there's probably, I won't go too much off the tangent here, but that sawmill, I'll stop and do more research before I talk about it. Probably that sawmill down south, down in Victoria, that I think it is, that closed down. Heaps of people lost their jobs and all that sort of thing. That closed down because of a building slowdown. That's what they blamed. They said a building slowdown. So Australia is talking about we got these 500,000 people coming in a year. We've got the perfect storm going on here too, sweethearts. We got 500,000 people a year coming in, and we're having a building slump. We're having, I've said it on another podcast. There was 3,500, 3,700 building companies collapsed last year. Well, wait for this year. Wait for 2026. I mean, my God, everything's collapsing. Everything's going broke. Not everything, but it's a general trend. So people are being evicted from their houses. Businesses are closing up. There's going to be a lot more bloody defaults in Australia shortly, with people not being able to pay the mortgages, because it all hinged on this bloody, fantastic employment figures and that. But people are just hanging in week to week. They save their deposit, and after that they stay broke forever, paying these massive mortgages. People are skimping on food to pay the mortgage. And the people that didn't get there, that haven't saved the massive great deposit you need for these overinflated housing prices, they, haven't. What's happening is every time I sell a house, it's to a cash buyer, pretty much, in this area. And if there's a tenant in it, and they get turfed out on the street, that's what's happening. I have got another one where we found them. We had another rental on the market, and we're not even putting them on the internet. We're not even just advertising our rentals, because there's no point, because we've still got 1 million people that have filled out an application. Not 1 million, but we're in a small country town, but a lot of people have filled out an application. And so they're the house they're living in, I've had to put it on the market. So once again, I've got cash buyers turning up to buy it. And luckily they can go to another one. But there's many others, especially if you're not the best tenant in the world. Like I said before in another podcast, the rough landlords and the rough tenants deserved each other, and they were fine. So you had a tenant that got on the grog sometimes and didn't pay the rent and got behind, took a while to catch up. Didn't keep it that clean. Rougher people. And sometimes they had a rough landlord too. Some old guy that saved up all his life or whatever and bought 2 or 3 houses so he could retire on the income. And sometimes he struggled, and didn't come around and fix things or whatever, or send someone to fix things. And then all the minimum standards came in. And you had locks on all the windows and heating and cooling and fencing and all this bullshit. And the smoke alarm laws and everything. And the landlords started saying, well, I can just go and buy shares in bloody Newmont Mine or Woolworths and earn the same money. And for that, because I own it all, I own my 3 houses outright, I'll just sell them and I'll go and, buy shares in BHP and make 5% return or whatever it is, and don't have all this bullshit laws coming from the government to say what I've got to do with my own house. And so the slumlords and the rough tenants sort of, at least the rough tenant had somewhere to live and had a house to live in. Now they're in a tent because that landlord went, bugger all those bloody stupid rules. I'll go and buy BHP shares. I'll sell all these 3 houses. And who bought them? A young guy or couple with a deposit saved up that hocked themselves up to the eyeballs to get it. And they moved into it. And the tenant went into a caravan because the tenant couldn't find another rough house and another rough landlord to coexist with, because the laws have come out to stop that, to make it so that it was too expensive to bring that property up to the so-called standard. So we've got all these high standards now in Australia, and none of them mean a piece of shit when you're living in a tent. So well done. Every time you have a win for the tenants, it's really a loss. It's worse than what it was before. You didn't fix it, you made it work. Not saying it was perfectly ideal before, but this is worse. And it's not just rough people and poor, lower socioeconomic, the politically correct way of saying it. Well, there's more and more lower socioeconomic people being created every day by the system that has been created by us all complying with the rules and regulations. Who made these rules and regulations? Do we know them? Have they been to our house for a barbecue? I doubt it. They got their own barbecues, much flashier ones. So we're going into a financial crisis that's way bigger than 08. And you know what? So that's what I was going to talk about, was all these people that have kept saying over the years, like, well, I feel sorry for the kids because they won't be able to afford anything, right? That's what they're saying. Well, hang on, it's a bit late. The kids are not being able to afford something now. And they think that people think that these prices are going to keep going up and up and up and up and up. My God. When our grandkids are born, they won't even be able to afford the front steps. They'll have to go, 100 of them will have to buy a house together. Do they think that? Is that what they think? I don't know. But no, they're in a massive bubble right now and they can't afford shit. But I've been telling people for quite a while, don't worry about your grandchildren. They're going to be able to afford a house, no problem at all. Because when this bubble bursts and all these foreclosures happen, the banks take the hit, really, because the house is still there. Someone can still live in it. I worked in an environment where people had paid $650,000 for a house, and the mining downturn happened, and not that the only reason that can really happen is government interference as usual, but the economy softened up, and that house wouldn't get more than $450,000, right? Lost $200,000. The guy loses his job in the mine, and she loses her job doing something or whatever, and they can't pay the mortgage, so they borrow $550,000. They buy the house for $650,000. They can't pay the mortgage. They get evicted, and the house gets auctioned by myself and sells for $450,000, and the bank gets their $100,000 back that they needed, and he walks away with a $100,000 bill and says, "Here, pay that off while you're renting somewhere." Right? In some cases, they borrowed 95% of it, and the house sold for a third less, and the bank took the hit of $200,000, lost $200,000 pretty much. But they made the currency up out of thin air anyway, so never mind. But it has real world consequences. Someone gets laid off somewhere when a lot of that happens. But yeah, so when the disaster unfolds this time, no one can predict the future, but I think, like I said, the houses are all still there. It's not like they disappear when the debt disappears. It's only debt that disappears. So shit tons of people are already starting to be evicted. And the more foreclosures we have in Australia, the more business closures we have in Australia, as just like '08, it's just like 2006, 7, 8. In 2006, we had a Goldilocks economy, and by 2008, we had a fucking disaster, because it wasn't a Goldilocks economy. It wasn't the sweet spot. It was the top of a mania. We are in the top of a mania. We've got people buying houses, like all you have to do is get a listing at a reasonable, no, not at a reasonable price, at the market price, or just slightly above, 5% above the market price. But the market is unbelievably out of control. But you can tell it's a mania. Everyone that rings me, just about, wants to buy something. They have cash, or they have the ability to borrow. But yeah, lots of cashies. Not many people want to sell. There's not a lot feeding it. The restriction in supply is unbelievable, and you just get lots of pressure from the buyers, that end of the market, and it's going to flip. And when it flips, people are going to be amazed. People are going to think it's not possible. You can see it, because it's long enough since '08 that all these new people in the market, so I was there, I didn't start selling real estate till 2010, but I understood a little bit more about the crash than most people would, just from studying economics. But in 2010, we were declining. there was more and more and more sellers coming into my office and saying, I want to sell, and shrinking buyers until it got to hardly any ever. So you normal practice in that market. Then that's how I started my real estate career, and I actually like the downturn. Not because I'm a sadist, but for other reasons. because the agents that grew up in the bubble and thought they were really good find out that it can get tough, and they disappear. They're like mushrooms. They just poof, they're up in the boom, and then all their offices just disappear and if you're good enough to hang in there, you can make a lot of money on the downturn. You can help a lot of people out. You can get them out of trouble before the bank takes their property, and that's your job. That's how I see my job, is providing high quality service to people, helping people, solving their problems. That's what I do. And so our front window just filled up with listings, and no one rang to buy anything. They just rang because they were thinking to sell. And you would list the property, and you would put it on, and you would know that it'd probably take you going to be 9 to 12 months before that sells. 9 months turnaround. Or from the time I listed it to the time I put the money in the bank, it's about 9 months. So, and we were in a low socioeconomic area, and the average 3-bedroom timber house in town, the old Queenslanders, on a 1/4 acre block with a shed in the backyard, they were lucky to get $250, some of them. In fact, when I first heard about this part of Australia, they were only $60,000. But that's so still the same houses, probably a little bit more worn out, but a shit ton more dollars. So, $250 seemed like a lot then, and now they're $400. So we're not in the middle of Sydney where that sort of thing's about $1.5 million or more on a 1/4 acre block. My God, it'd be $2 or $3 million, but in a quiet little town in the hills, yeah. So these kids that are not going to be able to afford a property, of course they are. There'll be thousands and thousands of them dumped on the market by banks. There'll be, there's always the natural market, where the real market, where people are getting older or moving, upsizing or something like that, But the opportunities out there for people to buy property at a reasonable rate is coming. And unfortunately, Australia might get fairly cheap compared to the rest of some other parts of the world, and might be a cheap place for a holiday like Bali or Philippines or Thailand, and it might have really cheap housing, relatively really cheap housing once the collapse is finished. What we need is deflation, especially in the housing market. But it may be the case that everything's bloody cheap here because the economy is destroyed, and there's so many people, so many poor people. But I'd say on the way, things are going to balance up there somewhere as the bubble bursts. Yes, there's a whole lot of people that are going to be holding the bag, right? Oh dear, they've just borrowed a bloody $700,000 to buy a house, and within 5 years, it's worth a fifth of or a sixth of what it was in dollars. Either that, or it's worth more in the same dollars. It's maybe worth $2 million, but those dollars won't buy much else. So you get $2 million for your house that cost you $600,000 or $700,000 today. You get $2 million for it in a couple of years' time, or 3 or 4 years' time, whatever. Depends on how much money they print. And that $2 million, what's 600, 700,000? That's like 5 new Land Cruisers. But that $2 million only buys you 1 new Land Cruiser. In 2 or 3 years' time. So today your house is worth 5 Land Cruisers. 2 or 3 years' time, it's only worth 1 Land Cruiser. That's what I'm talking about. That's the type of deflation. So forget about the amount of dollars that are attached to it, because that could be a Zimbabwe. That could be 10 billion. It doesn't matter, but what can you swap it for? That's what, something real. That's what it means. And I've done podcasts before about the gold to property ratio is getting better all the time. And because I save in gold and silver, I can buy twice the real estate than I could 3 years ago. And the trend continues. And soon, my gold and silver that are in the depository will be very expensive, and the houses will be very cheap. And then the strategy, maybe, but with all the rules and regulations, I still don't think I want to own a rental property in this country. So I will have a dilemma. I may have a dilemma about where to transfer it to, what to do with the expensive gold and silver and the cheap house. But if the collapse is good enough, if it really is good enough, a proper good collapse, then we should see, and hopefully see, a collapse in the following of rules and regulations. When everything gets desperate, none of those rules work anymore. Those minimum standards and smoke alarms and all that shit. When there's millions of people that have lost their house, and millions of people that need to go into a house, and everyone's poverty stricken from all these rules and government manipulation, people don't follow the rules anymore, and it's unpoliceable. It's unpoliceable. You cannot, keep track of it. And when it gets to that stage, you may as well just strike it off the register. You may as well just repeal the law, because it's not going to work. There used to be, and there still is a law out there that says you can't smoke marijuana in this country. And millions and millions and millions of people still smoke marijuana. And they can put a big drug bust on the bloody TV every now and again. But it really hasn't made much difference, has it? So once it gets, consensus that the rule is stupid, and that the people, and I'm not an advocate for smoking marijuana, I'm just saying it's an example. There's before they had all the speed cameras, there was an 80 sign there that you could do 90 past, and there's no consequence really. It's unenforceable in the fact that there wasn't a policeman on every standing next to every speed sign. Yes, they get you with a hairdryer every now and again. Now it's a bit different in the cities. I know you get tracked for looking at your phone, but next they'll have the thought cameras out there. You go, you had a bad thought there. Yep, that's $100 fine, whatever it is. We're getting into this dystopian nightmare. But once we get to a point where it's impossible to follow the rules, that the country's not wealthy enough to even follow its own rules, then they'll be null and void anyway. And that's what really needs to happen. And then the free market will move in, and people will shuffle around, and they'll buy their cheap houses, and they'll get their cheap rents, because this is a great big fat ugly bubble that had to burst, and I've been waiting for so long for it. So grab the popcorn, guys, and watch the show as it unfolds. And will it hold off a little bit? Like it's not holding off. It's not cancelling Christmas for it. It's just 2 or 3 years ago we were talking about Evergrande in China and Country Garden. They're collapsed. They've already collapsed. And that was the start of it. And then we had those couple of banks, Silicon Valley Bank and such in America. That was just like, Enron going broke, or long-term capital management back in the 2000 bubble. Like, oh, well, yep, bad thing happening over here, but nothing really. It's not systemic. It's not tied to anything. It's not linked in. But it all is linked, and it's all systemic. It just, like the old saying goes, how do you go broke? Just slowly at first, and then all of a sudden. And so we're in between slowly at first and all of a sudden right now. just in between. But we're getting very, very close to the all of a sudden. And traditionally it happens in, October. But I don't know if we've got to wait another year, do we? Do we have to wait till next October? I don't know about that. I don't know if we have to wait that long. I think somewhere early next year it'll really get going, but it's heating up. It's cranking up now. So, all right, that's enough of my rambling. Thanks for listening, guys. Enjoy your day. I'll see you on the next one.